Well, usually in the days leading up to my podcast with people, people are always asking me, who's on deck? What's the next guest? What's the topic? And this week when I mentioned anxiety and stress, people just sighed and nodded and they said, okay, this one definitely should be good. Stress is one thing, anxiety is another, and there's so many other words that can be thrown into the mix that we all just we listen to them in passing. And so I'm really looking forward to tackling this. So this brings us to episode 42 of Living Your Life with Leanne Lang, the podcast brought to you by Extension Marketing. And for more information, of course, you can always head to extensionmarketing.com. Arnold Zeman is joining us, a professional coactive coach, and really interested in his background. Did I say that? A coactive coach.
Perfectly.
Yeah, perfectly. Okay. And it's funny because we met today. And I was saying to you, you are one of the first guests that I've had on the podcast that I haven't interviewed, I haven't had a relationship with prior to coming in for this. But we reached out, we touched and connected on LinkedIn of all places.
That's right.
And the topic spoke to me. This is something that a lot of people are talking about.
Yeah, no, absolutely, especially this time of year. Mm-hmm. But everybody can identify with anxiety and or stress, whatever word you want to use. And the reason for that is, don't want to get too highfalutin here, but anxiety is part of the human condition. It's there for a reason.
Okay, so we use these words. We can say we're anxious, we're stressed, we're kind of feeling the blues, we're dealing with depression. I mean, these are all words that kind of get thrown out, and yet there is a significant difference between them and how we should be viewing it. It's different to be a little stressed than to be dealing with anxiety. And this is something that you battle and that you face every day with the clients and the people that you work with.
Exactly. So, well, a couple of things in what you've just said. Anxiety, depression. The medical community, the psychological community has understood for some time that there is a link between the two, between anxiety and depression. The medical model treats the symptoms. So it's not always clear where the boundaries are. I don't feel like I can really talk about depression. I mean, an expert might say, oh, you have some bits of depression, and perhaps I do. What I feel I can talk about is anxiety. And, your point about the language, yeah, it's in our everyday language. And they are different things. They're kind of like on a continuum. So it's normal for people to, given different situations, to get anxious. That's perfectly normal. And in fact, it's called situational anxiety. So you may have to give a public speech. That wouldn't be a problem for you. But for most of us, you may have to stand up in front of a lot of people and talk. And you get stage fright, or you can't do it. When that situation is over or removed, you've avoided it or whatever, you're not anxious anymore. So that's one type of. Am I talking too much?
No. Oh, God, Arnold, we've got an hour. You're going to be talking plenty, let me tell you.
Oh, I'm just warming up.
I know. It's one thing, right, to be a situational anxious, right? That you've got a competition, you've got a high stress presentation. Absolutely. There are people who, from the moment they get up.
That's right.
Right? It can be debilitating. And this is where you come at this from a very different perspective, because at one point you weren't the expert talking about this. You were very much suffering. Very much suffering, and it's an ongoing fact of my life. So the real big difference between clinical anxiety or an anxiety disorder and the situational stuff is for the anxiety condition. There usually isn't an identifiable reason or object for being anxious. You're absolutely right. You wake up in the morning and you feel this dread. It's in your body. There's, you're not sure why, but you expect bad things to happen. And am I safe? How am I going to deal with that? And so for a long time,
the way I dealt with that was partly through medication, and still, I'm not against medication. I think it can be very helpful. It is for me. The other way I dealt with it is a classic kind of mechanism, avoidance. So things that really stressed me out or made me anxious, like driving, I just avoided driving, avoided, getting a license, doing things like that.
Can I ask, like, when for you, like, were you an anxious child? Like, am I allowed to use that word anxious already in referring to things? When do you feel that for you, in your experience, you kind of thought no one else seems to be going through it exactly like me?
Beautiful question. The short answer is yes, absolutely. Just the sense of otherness that me as a kid, I didn't feel the same as my friends my age. I didn't feel that they had the same kind of family that I had, the same kind of parents that I had, and the same kind of, I didn't express it in those terms then, but the same kind of family dynamics. So yeah, there is, I would say, some of it has the roots in that. Some of it also, in my case, probably has the roots in a predisposition to be anxious, and like, who knows how to identify that and make that more precise. About 25 years ago, a psychologist in the States identified a trait, not a disorder, but a trait called highly sensitive person, HSP. Her name's Elaine Aron. And when highly sensitive people have, how to put it, unfavorable development experiences as a child, they can be more prone to anxiety, depression, and other situations. All of that, I think, plays into, my own situation.
Was it a healthy? Were your parents involved? They were non-involved?
No. My parents had their own kind of issues. My younger brother was disabled. Died when he was 11. I was 13. So a lot of my mother's focus was on him. My mother was anxious herself. So there was kind of a, I don't need to look after you. You're healthy. I need to look after Stanley and myself because I've got a case of the nerves.
Your mother recognized that she had.
Yeah, I don't think it was ever treated successfully. She just endured it for her life. My father was totally wrapped up in his business. He was a shopkeeper, and totally wrapped up in that to the and worry and brooding about how things were going in business. So, I didn't have, I wasn't abused physically, but I had absent parents. And that's one of the worst things that a child can experience. It depends on the child. That's where the predisposition may kick in. One child may be fine with that and blossom, and another child like myself may, come up with all sorts of strategies to face the world because he doesn't feel like he's really being given that support and love and nurturing.
The strategies that you came up with, though, it seems that in the story that I'm about to hear, could have been self-detrimental. Like you avoided, or you stayed. What did you hide? Like what did you do?
So I limited my life, really. You're absolutely right. The strategies to avoid this very uncomfortable feeling of not being safe, having to have an escape plan, not knowing what to do in certain situations, had a price. And the price, writ large, was not being able to enjoy everything that everyone else enjoyed in life, and that everyone else took for granted. So my story involves, and this is jumping ahead, and I'm willing to go back, but to give you an example of avoidance, out of university, my family was in Montreal. I came to Ottawa because of a job offer at what's now called Global Affairs. So I was in the Foreign Service stream. And I realized, like really early on, how did I get here? Okay, I wrote exams. I applied to write the exams. I was interviewed. They thought I did well enough to make an offer. But now I'm going to be sent to places where, at least in Montreal and Ottawa, I know what to do if I have a panic attack. I know where to get help, but being sent to India or Bangladesh or Senegal, that just terrified me. How did I deal with that? I left probably what was going to be a very promising career at what was then called External Affairs, now Global Affairs. I left because I couldn't hack that. I just couldn't hack that. So yeah, there was a big price to pay for me. In terms of professional achievement, satisfaction, but also contribution to society.
But you mentioned, you didn't know where you were going to go if you'd had a panic attack in, say, Bangladesh. What for you did a panic attack feel like? What went through your mind and body to realize that you were in a panic attack?
So panic attacks are just awful. You, in my experience, and people have different experiences, in my experience, it was like something dreadful is going to happen. I'm standing in line at the bank at the Arts Center. I remember this, and I'm going to faint. I'm going to have a medical emergency. And then your mind just spins and is consumed by what if this happens? What if that happens? You start perspiring, your heart starts racing. You feel, it's the fight, flight, freeze mechanism. And you feel you have to do something, but you don't know what to do. And with me, there was also the shame piece. Oh my God, say it's nothing. Say I do faint and it turns out just to be anxiety. That's going to be so embarrassing. Hard to. I'm looking at you and I'm not sure if you get it.
Well,
it's
I do get it. I feel for you.
Thank you.
I feel for you that, I could have been standing in the bank line next to you.
That's right.
And I'm just going about my day. And there's another individual who's in front of me who feels like the world is caving in on them. And I wouldn't know the difference. And you're just sitting there, in a mad sweat trying to just get through the day. And I'm assuming that this is what people are experiencing. And you were at least out and about and trying to live and out. There are people who aren't even leaving their homes, leaving their beds, leaving anything because it's like, why bother? I'm just going to have this panic attack while I'm at the bank. And you must deal or in your conversations with people, how terrifying and how restrictive. They must be like a prisoner.
Sure.
To this anxiety.
No, you're very insightful, Leanne. Prisoner is a key word. You're in a prison. You've set up the bars yourself, because my learning from all this is about the relationship that I have with what's going on with me. And the relationship can be, this is terrible and this is what's happening to me, or it can be something healthier and more constructive. And that's the kind of work that I do. It's a process called focusing. And if you want, I can go into it. The type of focusing I do is all about creating an inner relationship. So we relate to people around us, as soon as we wake up. Even if we live by ourselves, we go to Starbucks, we go shopping. You're talking to people. You're with other people. There are also parts of us in our body that we can become identified with, or we can learn how to get a bit of distance from and relate to them as if they were people that we were meeting. So anxiety is one of those things. There is a way of getting into an awareness of your body, how your body feels when you're anxious, and making friends with that anxiety, treating what you're feeling like maybe the chipmunk you see on a walk, you're finding, oh, that's really interesting. A chipmunk, look how cute. But the chipmunk is terrified of you. So what can you do to make friends with that chipmunk? You give it space. You don't try to get it to do anything. You don't judge it. You're not aggressive. You're compassionate. But the big thing is you give it space until it realizes, this is probably not a threat, and maybe it'll let you get a little bit closer. So that kind of work is what focusing work is, with somebody who facilitates that. It's elaborate, and yet it's very simple because it's very human. Some people can do it very naturally. It just comes naturally to them to say, oh, geez, I'm feeling something in my chest. What is that? To approach it with curiosity, without judgment, with kindness.
It seems like, okay, I'm going to give the chipmunk some space, that it could be viewed on like there's a simple solution, or you're not saying it's simple, but that it takes time to be able to create this skill within you that you can have this conversation with yourself. And yet, if your heart is racing or your chest is tightening, and you're immobile, like at what point are you going, okay, I can do this myself, or to be able to have the outreach to people to say, I'm going through this and I feel immobilized by it.
So talking to people, the key is, for me, is relationship and anxiety. And by relationship, I don't mean something romantic. I mean being with other people, and being able to let people know how you're feeling, and get a friendly ear, not just pick yourself up.
Yeah, well, come on. How often did you hear that? Just get over it. Get over it. Just move on. Just don't think about it.
Not helpful.
Right? Like how that would be, I would say 90% of a person's normal reaction would be like, oh, get over it. It's not that bad.
So this is very, you're right. This is very counterintuitive. Why would you want to make friends with something that feels so awful? The question I'd put to people who say that is, have you ever tried to drive it away? How does that work for you? Trying to control anxiety, manage anxiety, tame anxiety. If you treat anxiety as an enemy.
So when you were younger then, you were saying that you didn't want to go get your driver's license. You have your driver's license.
I do, but I don't drive, Leanne. I took an Uber here.
So you don't drive?
I don't, to this day.
So you've never, you ended up getting your driver's license, but you don't drive.
Exactly. It's great for ID.
So, okay, I just assumed you drove here.
It's
a snowy day, and I'm just like, oh, you know what? Yeah, I think we make an assumption. You have chosen that this part of your life brings you anxiety. Would you say that you have made friends with this aspect, or that you have made adjustments in knowing how you're going to get to and from your whole life. That's a big thing to pass up, the independence of driving. I mean, it must be so much easier now with Uber. But I'm sure it wasn't like that 30 years ago.
No, you're right. No, I mean, yeah, you have it in spades. And keeping quiet about that is also a burden that I had. You know, I would tell people if I had to, but I wouldn't come out and meet someone at a party and say, oh, by the way, I don't drive. Because there was shame about that. And there still is some shame. So no, I haven't made friends with that specifically. That's... It's not like you can deal with anxiety. Okay, let's go through my to-do list.
What would your list say, if you don't mind? Okay, and you talk about this, right? Shame is one thing, but being able to talk about it, the language is another. What would your list look like? I already know now you don't drive.
Right.
What, in comparison, because I think people at home are making a checklist. What is it that they suffer from, or what is it that they experience, and kind of put the variables on these lists? Like, could you make a list of the things that you know affects your life differently than the average, I don't want to say average person, but like a person who isn't dealing with, who
isn't dealing with this. Yeah, so driving's one, swimming is another. Don't swim. Never learned to swim.
Fear of drowning, okay, it overwhelmed you.
Exactly. There is a...
Is that a hard question to ask? Like, or to
it's
answer?
Hard to. Oh, yeah. There's something in me that doesn't respond well to, not because you asked the question, but to the idea of, okay, just list the things, and then we'll address each of those things and try to find a fix.
You can't. This podcast is brought to you by Extension Marketing. They are a new breed of marketing agency that acts as your virtual marketing department, designing and implementing cost-effective marketing strategies that will grow your business. I can speak to this personally, as I've been using the Extension Marketing team to help me launch and grow my business. Founder Pat Whalen has been a lifesaver for me, a genuine coach, guiding me along the way into uncharted territory. Tell them you're a friend of the show and receive a free 1-hour consultation. Check them out at extensionmarketing.com.
Some psychologists will offer cognitive behavioral therapy, exposure prevention therapy to make adjustments to your behavior and to your thinking. So you can do these things.
Right, like a lot of people have a fear of flying.
Yeah.
But they need to get from A to B. And I
have no problem with flying.
Someone else is in control.
Someone else is in control, and when you're in this metal tube, it doesn't feel like you're 5 miles up in the air, hurtling through space.
But you didn't trust yourself with the driving. Was that the tube was smaller, or that you were responsible for the tube?
It's you use the word overwhelm, and that's a great word to use. It's all the inputs, the sensory inputs. There's the wheel. In the case of a manual transmission, there's that. And there are all these other people on the road. And, I'm in the wrong lane, and I have to shift over to this lane, and I didn't do that. Now I'll have to go past.
It becomes overwhelming.
It becomes just overwhelming. And the easiest way, and I'm not advocating this, I am far from it. I'm just saying this is a typical way of dealing with what produces anxiety in you, and I still use it. So I'm not here to say I've got this magic tonic that will take care of all of your things. And for another, this is really important. So much of us is about doing things, how to get from A to B, how to get this result. Apply, cut out the negative talk, be self-compassionate, and then you can do blah, blah, blah. I'm not about doing so much in terms of my work with myself and with other people. It's more about being, just being, which is a revolutionary concept. How can I be with this chipmunk? How would this chipmunk like me to be with it? You're in the park, you sit down on the bench, there's a stranger on the bench, and maybe you'd like to talk, but you want to kind of figure out in yourself what would this person need for me just to enter into conversation with them, for me just to be with them? Well, they'd need probably they need some trust, some feeling of trust. They'd have to feel that I'm not a threat to them. Stuff like that. Well, those types of attitudes not only can be cultivated, but I believe that we all have them innately.
So this is the work that you do. Once you started to do the work on yourself, you felt that there was work that needed to be done with others. So what is it like? What did you study and what did you learn to be able to do this practice and do this coactive coaching with others? Like what does this entail?
Okay, so coactive coaching is the property of a coaching company called the Coaches Training Institute. Coaching is often referred to as a profession. I heard someone recently say something that I thought made a lot of sense. It's not a profession because there are no barriers to entering it. You can call yourself a coach. Nobody's going to stop you from calling yourself a coach and running a business as a coach. So it's more like an industry than it is a profession. There are all sorts of schools that will put you through training, certify you, and set you up to be certified by an international coaching body. The one I'm most familiar with is called the International Coach Federation. I'm accredited, certified by them and by my coaching training school. But there are other avenues, other training schools that are recognized by the ICF, that are recognized by others. So I have that. What is that about? The most important thing for me about coaching is a belief that everyone is naturally creative, resourceful, and whole. People don't need to be fixed, unless they have really serious debilitating problems that are medically diagnosable. We're
always trying to fix. And
yes.
I love that. We don't, that's a huge statement. Just fix it. It can't, that right there is a massive component.
Exactly.
We don't need to be fixed. It's not always about fixing the problem.
You really have got it. That's right. It is not about fixing. So coaching, as distinct from, say, consulting or mentoring, isn't about, there's this issue, there's this problem. Well, as a mentor, in my experience, here's how I dealt with that problem or would have dealt with that problem. Or a consultant, well, let me study, everything that's involved, and I'll come up with a recommendation for you. Coaching in its purest form is about the client finding the answers for their own personal or professional growth by working with someone who's asking them very powerful questions, whose agenda is what the person in front of them, where the person wants to get to.
What are your clients coming to you for then?
So
are you able to kind of give me a sense of what in a day would a client be like, or the situational issue like?
Yeah, so a lot of it has to do with overthinking. A lot of it has to do with how they're seen by other people in the workplace and how they imagine that they're seen. A lot of it has to do with their acceptance or lack of acceptance of who they are and who they want to be, confidence.
Do you have people coming to you, anxious about, in their job, they need to be able to perform, or I need to be able to do presentations.
You bet.
So this would be, and you would go through almost this focusing, like that would be one of the areas of which you would work with.
So what I would do with someone like that, who is amenable to that, is introduce the idea of getting in touch with what your body already knows and is holding, but hasn't found words for. Sounds a bit woo-woo.
Oh, there's been so many woo things said in this room.
Well, this isn't woo-woo.
Yeah.
I'm here to say there are scientific studies about levels of experiencing what's going on inside. And in fact, focusing was discovered in a study about 50 years ago of how come some people who go to therapy get better and some people don't? They just stay, forever in therapy. And what the researchers learned was the people who, when they were talking with a therapist and were asked a question by the therapist, and they just paused and tried to get in touch with what the reaction of their body was to that question, and then put that into words, those were the people who got better. The people who weren't able to do that, who, that was just foreign to them, tended not to get better.
So if I'm understanding this correctly, it's listening, allowing the body to respond to the question, or giving the body a time to react and to see how it feels by that question before jumping into an answer or responding right away.
That's a large part of it. Slowing down, looking for words, seeing which words fit with your body sense and which words don't. For example, when you have forgotten someone's name and you're trying to remember their name and you can't come up with it, how does that feel? Versus, that's the name. It's Ruth. Got it. It was eluding me. So there is a shift that we've all experienced in our bodies when we know that's the wrong name. We try out various names, and then we find the right name. The body feels differently. And if you can get in touch with that, and you can, because it's a very human thing to do, although some people need to be taught it, like myself. It wasn't natural for me. I'm really into my head and all sorts of intellectual ideas. You can get insights, you can get information, you can get a shift in how you feel. So for somebody, to get back to your question, who has a presentation to do in the workplace and is really uptight about that, rather than coaching them on practicing, on writing it out, on going over it in front of a mirror, maybe going over it with their spouse, seeing what the reaction is. What I would do is take them through this process of seeing what their body already knows about that. And so it's not a recipe and, so if I do these things, this will happen. No, it's like what I said about the name. Oh, that's it. I feel differently now. I feel more open. I feel more, something is right now with me. Do you get what I'm trying to say?
I do. And I'm assuming there was a point when this happened with you. Like, that you would have had your own transformation of figuring all of this out, because, you passed up a really good job. You think about it now.
Tell me.
That many
Tell
years
me
ago,
about it.
You would be enjoying life right now.
Yeah.
That something needed to happen for you to be able to get to this point.
Yeah, well, that's absolutely right. And let me put it in these terms. I've learned through my coaching experience and through my training in focusing that everything, even the stuff I haven't enjoyed, but everything I've experienced has gone into making me who I am. And so it becomes really important to accept accept the parts that I may not like as having a real bearing on how I've turned out as a human being. So yeah, I passed up certain things, but I have a totally different sense of who I am in the world, how I want to be with people, what matters to me in terms of how I live my life. I love this quote that's just coming to mind. The American author, I'm going to get his name. No, George Saunders. So he's primarily known as a short story writer. His first novel was called Lincoln in the Bardo. So he is quoted as saying that his biggest regret in life is when he could have been kind and he wasn't to someone else. I mean, that just really touches me deeply in a way that talks about, what this thing of being born and living on earth is about.
Kindness.
Yeah.
The lack of...
Yeah, kindness to other people. There's another quotation I like that's related. Be kind because everyone you meet is fighting the same hard battle. We're all in this together. We're all humans experiencing a lot of joy and triumphs, but also sadness, sorrows. And I think for me, it's important to connect with people on that basis and to support them.
How are we dealing with it differently, though, when you talk about someone who's dealing with anxiety, who, as we mentioned, everything becomes overwhelming, to someone who might be then dealing with depression? The same the two people not wanting to get out of bed. One is feeling like everything possibly that could go wrong with someone maybe dealing with anxiety, and then the darkness or this. How different is it then for someone dealing with depression, and to differentiate the two?
Yeah, so I'm not an expert on that, and when depression gets really severe, cyclical manic depressive disorder, I really can't speak to that. What I can speak to is when people learn about, oh, there is something I can do for myself here, in addition to seeing a psychiatrist, a psychologist, to taking medication, all of which I firmly believe need to be on the table. But there are other avenues, and one of them is what I've been calling focusing. How is that different? Well, in the hands of a facilitator or a guide, you would lead somebody through what they're experiencing and how they're experiencing it. So focusing is about how. It's not about what. What's this? What's causing this? How am I going to change this? Focusing is about how am I going to relate to this stranger, this strangeness, this chipmunk that might be afraid of me. I've been throwing quotations at you. There's another one that I'm fond of. Nothing inside us is our enemy. Everything inside us wants us to live further. So I'm sure you've heard, when you're anxious, when you're depressed, when this happens, there's a good reason for it. Your body is trying to get you past something, and this is the only way it knows how.
It could be a short-term thing, though, or it could be a long-term thing. And I would assume those that are dealing with this long-term, are you not looking for like an end in sight?
Yeah.
Are you not striving for that light at the end of the tunnel? Like, I would think that they would want to feel a finish line of some sort that they've.
So that's very natural, a very natural expectation. The finish line or the light in the tunnel has to include if I can say, crap that you don't like, that you want to get rid of.
It's coming with you.
Because it's a part of you. It's something that made you who you are. And the best thing you can do to it is to honor it, respect it, and not identify with it. Okay? This isn't me being anxious. This is a part of me. This is somewhere inside of me that's feeling anxious. And I'm just going to see if I can be with how that feels in my body. I'm going to see if I can sense how it might like me to be with it. I'm going to see how it sees things from its point of view. I'm going to ask, it doesn't want X, Y, and Z to happen. What does it imagine might happen if X, Y, and Z occurs? So it's all about how you treat this. And so describing it, we're limited. People who go through it, something happens. It's really on an experience level.
I'm thinking there's a lot of people who will come to you having lived with this, having seen where it's held them back in their life, and are seeking help so that they can further to do things. There could be things and people listening, for the timing of this, the holidays.
Yep.
They've got family coming over. They've got I would say it's financial stress, anxiety of entertaining, anxiety of family. Like, how are we over the next couple of weeks getting through what is typically a very stressful situation where some will just say, I'm stressed for the holidays, and some will actually have a negative reaction to what is supposed to be a festive time of year. And then you feel guilty that you're not in this joyful, yay, we're going to do all this stuff, because you're just like, you're dreading it.
Exactly. That really complicates it or compounds it. I'm supposed to.
Yes, we're supposed to feel
I'm
a certain
supposed to be happy. I'm supposed to enjoy family, and Uncle so-and-so is really ticking me off and pressing buttons. I don't have a magic solution. What I can point to, though, is the benefit of slowing down, pausing, recognizing what's going on inside. Oh, that's really a trigger. That's really annoying me. I'm feeling angry. Feeling those things doesn't mean you have to act on them. Point number one. So recognizing that, I'm not in a state of calm. I'm not in my best self. I'm somewhere else. Another thing you can do is what we call resourcing, building yourself up. What are the things that make you feel really fully alive? What are the things that make you happy? Is it, gardening? Is it an experience with an animal, a horse, or your pets? Is it listening to music? And I'm not saying you can tear yourself away from the dinner table and go do that. But what you can do is bring those things to mind in your body and how they make you feel. And then the third thing you can do, it's the 3 R's, is relate. How am I going to relate to this anger? The first thing to do is to become aware that the anger isn't all of you. It's just one part of you. You are much bigger than the anger. And knowing that, how can you be with that, say, snarling wolf that you see in the zoo, who's, terrifying you, but you're at a distance, you're protected. How can you be with that and not act out? So I'm not giving you a very,
Well, no, I think
Leanne, do this,
No.
and this, and you'll be fine.
Well, I think people need to realize is there's no easy answer to any of it. And I mean, yeah, you can make your checklist. And I'm a checklist person. I have and it's funny, on the day, it's like the checklist of things. And I find as I check things off, the anxiety level so with the stress level for me, the anxiety level for me, what would that where would I fall? If I'm just trying to get things done, is that more just the everyday stresses? I
can't diagnose
I
anybody.
know. People need to ask, what should people be asking themselves? What questions should they be asking themselves to differentiate between, is this my everyday stress? Or is there a part of me that's
how much
building
is this? Yeah. How much is what is occurring and what I'm experiencing interfering with my functioning? Am I staying in bed and refusing to get out of bed?
Well, can you talk about the 2 a.m., 3 a.m. wake-ups from people who get up in the middle of the night and their heads are spinning? They can't get back to sleep. Is it that they're stressed? Is it that they're anxious? And then we can't get back to sleep. And so the anxiety starts to kick in that says, I haven't been able to, I'm not sleeping. I'm now I'm only going to get this many hours of sleep. And if I don't get back to sleep, then I'm going to be tired. It's like a perpetual... They build on each other.
So those things can be addressed by medicine. I don't mean by taking drugs. I mean by physicians, sleep clinics. They can be addressed by relaxation techniques, meditation, mindfulness.
Many of us are trying to stay in that bed and trying to just listen to your breathing. One of the pieces of advice that I've often come across when you can't fall asleep in bed is get out. Bed is somewhere you sleep and do other things. It's not somewhere that you toss and turn. So if you're awake, get up and do something else. Read until you're tired or whatever. That's one response. Another response, which I like to cite, famous psychiatrist named Viktor Frankl wrote a very famous book called Man's Search for Meaning. He was a survivor of the concentration camps. And in that book, among other things, by the way, he pinpointed the finding of meaning was the key factor between those who survived and those who didn't. I find his story is fascinating.
So one of the things he says in that book is he talks about paradoxical intention. And I've tried this. I don't always come back to it when I can't sleep, but it's forming the intention very actively and aggressively. I'm going to stay awake. There's no way I'm going to fall asleep. I am going to stay awake until it's time to get up. Often what will happen is, and that's the paradox, first of all, you'll laugh, and that's a good sign. It's like, this is crazy. The other thing that'll happen is you start to feel tired. Your body says, what? You want me to stay up? I'm tired.
I'm going to try that next time.
It's in the book. If you know the book, it sounds like you know the book, Man's Search for Meaning.
I know the name the mean, there's been discussion about it as of late. So as soon as you said his name, I
worth reading
that story. Right now we have, individuals who are hopefully kind of recognizing where on this, I can't even say on the spectrum, right? We all have very different experiences. And gosh, I was telling you beforehand, Jamie, my 10-year-old, would kind of have these tantrums. Mm-hmm. And it was, and it would come out as aggressive and she'd be anxious and she would say that she was anxious. And it was almost like we had to let her finish. Like, it wasn't like trying to stop the tantrum at what was happening. It was like, ride it out. Let the body recover, and then it needed to be held and comforted. And then once that was done, it was like she needed to get it out of her system, recognize it, and then you move on. But it was the allowing it, and then the comforting after.
You're using such keywords: allowing, not doing, not forcing, not going through the checklist. Checklists are fine. Don't misunderstand me for all sorts of things that you need to accomplish. But in this type of work, allowing something to be what it needs to be, and approaching it with kindness. And this is kind of revolutionary, because these feelings, these parts of ourselves, they aren't used to that. What they're used to is, I don't like feeling like this. Get away.
Yeah. Or fix it, or put it in a box, or just behave,
and that
or just act like everyone else, or be normal. And that is your normal. And it's accepting it.
So in the martial arts, and I'm not the biggest expert in this, but in some of them, there is this response that goes with the attack rather than opposes the attack. And I'm talking about something similar here. The working with, not opposing, not trying to get it to be something else than what it is. You also mentioned comforting. Very important. So how do you do that in yourself or with a child? Well, you get to learning that there is a bigger part of yourself that can be with this anger, but not be merged in it, and can send it comfort and compassion and love.
You know, my reference was to a child, but this could be to a partner,
Yeah.
to a friend, to a parent. It's oftentimes you feel like you're the one that's attacked, though.
Yeah.
Right? And people tend to do that with the people they are most close to and most love. So when you're having these attacks or panic attack or anxiety, you most take it out on the people who are closest to you.
For sure. So if that's a question, the magic solution, if there is one, is to pause and not do what you're sensing you want to do, to recognize it and just be with it and not act on it.
Kind of like in a therapist's office, is take that moment to see how your body, if I'm listening correctly to what you've been saying, is taking that moment to see how that body is reacting to. You
totally get what I'm talking about. I can tell by your responses. It's this allowing. You know, it's even a basic mindfulness practice. Oh, I'm getting all upset. Oh, isn't that interesting? Sorry, Veronica. I'm getting all upset. Oh, and it's peaking and it's over here, and I'm just going to ride it. Oh, no, it's going down.
I know, but people are so much into instant gratification or instant reaction. You know, it's instant, and that is probably, I think, the biggest thing for people is to. It's that instant.
You're right.
That pause, which I would gather 90% of us don't take that pause ever. We instinctively react,
and that's and that's why some people find it helpful to go to among other things, they might be seeing a psychologist, a social worker, a counselor. They might be taking medication, and in addition, they might find it helpful to. And I'm not touting this, but they might find it helpful to engage in a process of body awareness that isn't just what they're thinking. Now, you have to be trained to do it. Short of being trained to do it, you go see someone who can facilitate it for you.
How often are you doing it with yourself?
So, practically every day. I'll tell you something which I found interesting in the focusing world. This focusing practice or process started in Chicago in the late 60s. Yeah, mid to late 60s. And one of the things that just spontaneously grew out of it was focusing partners. So what did that mean? It means two people who have gone through the same training in focusing, spend time each week. In those days, it was on the phone because it was the late 60s. You know, they were rotary phones. They were landlines. They'd spend an hour each week with each other, and one of them would be the companion while the other one focused, and then they'd switch roles. So I have about 3 of those partnerships right now. One of my partners, and it's great in the internet age, one of my partners is normally in Colorado. They're in Australia. We're focusing later today. Even with the time change, it'll be 8 a.m. tomorrow for them, and late afternoon for me. Another one is in California.
So you go through this process that you take your own clients through, and you do it almost daily or often to keep yourself. Does it keep you balanced? Like, what does it do?
It's about presence. It's about being present to what you're experiencing fully, and allowing yourself to have that experience and seeing what you can learn from that experience. You may, in a focusing session, sense something that wants to do A and something that says, no, that's a stupid thing to do. Don't do that. Well, the beauty of focusing is you don't have to decide. You don't have to choose. That's part of the focusing attitude, to respect both of those parts and see what they need, see what they're trying to tell you.
I think for some people, they're gonna go, this isn't for me, right? They're like, I can't grasp it. I'm hoping that there are some listening that go, this could be that hidden gift that I'm able to incorporate and do with myself, but I need to learn how to do this properly, and I need to kind of take these suggestions and be able to learn how to act or how to evolve with them. How often are you doing this? Like, I know that you do one-on-one coaching. Is that how you do most of the work, is with people?
Yep.
Yeah, and I saw on your website, right? It was people working, there was executives looking to be able to get through certain aspects, or, people with, you're seeing all spectrums of people.
Of course, because anxiety comes up everywhere. It's not just limited for people like myself who were in the Foreign Service. They can be entrepreneurs. They can be working in organizations in Ottawa in high tech. They can be working in the arts.
They could be not working at all because
they could be not working at all. Now that becomes an issue in terms of payment. I'm in a situation in life where that's not the driver for me, so I'm happy to discuss that with people. But you're right. The first thing is people have to be interested in exploring it. If they think this isn't for me, okay, I'm not trying to convince you. Great, more power to you.
But for some, this is that could be that key.
I would like to see it on the menu of choices available for people. And unfortunately in Ottawa, okay, there's focusing is very, as it's developed, it's been very non-dogmatic. So what do I mean by that? Well, it doesn't have to be done this way. And people have taken it different ways. So there are developments in what's called whole body focusing, what I'm interested in, interrelationship focusing, domain focusing, biospiritual focusing. I mean, the list goes on and on because people have different interests in it. The way people can find out about it is on the internet. There's a website called focusing with one S, .org. It's the website of the international body that regulates focusing.
Okay. www.focusing.org.
Yeah.
Okay. And if people are looking to get in touch with you?
So my name, Arnold Zeman, Coach, .com.
Okay.
Yeah.
I will have that. I will have the information as always in my newsletter. I know it's funny because I'm going to say we're well over like the hour. Yeah.
Are we?
Can you imagine? I know.
I have no sense of time. I love talking about this. And, I figure, okay, I've been dealt this hand in life. How can I help? Mm-hmm. Maybe I can help people with what I've learned, what I've experienced, how it's affected my life, being open about that. There's nothing to be ashamed about.
Yeah, I think having the open dialogue is a start, and comforting, kindness, and being, the doing and the being. So two main things also. Arnold, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Good luck to all of you who are at least kind of dealing with this on a day-to-day basis, and some of you who are going to go, this will pass, the holidays will pass, the shopping, the festivities, and to be able to differentiate and know the people around you to differentiate between what they're actually going through, and whether you are at that bank and seeing someone in front of you. Like, I can't imagine what that experience must have been like. So I really appreciate it, Arnold.
That really
Thank you so much.
speaks to who you are as a person. No, really. To put it in those terms.
To understand the people that you're surrounded by. With that being said, you're number 42 of the podcast. There are 41 others that are available. If you have the opportunity, please listen. There's such a variety of guests on the Living Your Life with Leanne Lang podcast. If you have the opportunity, please leave a comment or subscribe or let other people know and share the dialogue, share the podcast so that we can spread all of this information as far reaching as possible. That's a wrap. Episode 42 of Living Your Life with Leanne Lang.